really interested in, like, your the practitioner side of your life. Like, and how does it work? Like, so, like, talking about in our lifetime, things happen like tsunami, and I think tsunami affected Sri Lanka as well, big way. Were you there during that time?
Mhm.
Can you give us a bit of, just walk us through like how it worked, like, uh, how you, go there, and your mindset, what kind of things you need to be there,
Mhm.
and when you are there, what it looks like, what it is, what is in front of you.
Mhm. So I happened to be in Sri Lanka on holiday, and I was at my parents' house when the tsunami happened, and somebody who works in the disaster management system in Sri Lanka called me. So basically, after 2 hours of the tsunami, I was on the ground helping the coordination and the response. Um, what was really interesting from from the experiential point of view, there was no UN INGO heads of the country at that time because everybody was on Christmas holidays. So that allowed actually to people in Sri Lanka to take the ownership of the response. At least during the first 4 weeks, it was the Sri Lankan people looked after each other without any major outside help. And also, you might find it interesting because um, the peace process was going on at that time. Um, it was quite volatile, but because of the tsunami, all the Tamils and Sinhalese came together to help people, and I thought that was a brilliant opportunity to bring peace about until the UN and all the INGOs started coming with a lot of money, which again divided people. So that's the that's aspect. But then in any disaster or a conflict I go, including in my own country, whether it's a tsunami or anything like that, I go with the attitude of I don't know, and that's what I always do. My ignorance, I identify with my ignorance and try to learn from people who are there. So in that sense, I never claim that I've done anything because it's all my work is very collaborative in that way. I Yeah. So there are a lot of things I learn from people, and there are maybe some things they learn from me, and in that together we try to create something,
Mm.
and that's what we try to look at, and that's what I try to bring into my teaching as well. So in the bigger picture, that with all the simulations, all the pre-disaster planning and all of that, you never can plan for a disaster
Mm.
because you don't know. First, like you can't predict nature. There is a level of prediction, but you never know how it goes. And second element is that there is a huge unpredictability of human beings. We don't know how humans react to situations. If there is a if there is one incident, 10 humans would react 10 different ways. There is no universal reaction. So so in that sense, we can't really plan and say, oh, what are we going to do? But then in something like tsunami, where about 1 million people got displaced within 10-15 minutes. um what I've seen is that again the human beings have that amazing ability to adapt and move. And so suddenly in certain communities new leadership emerge, who take control and charge. So as an external, what we did was to collaborate with them, you engage with them, and so they continue to take care of each other,
Mm.
until again, as I said, suddenly the international humanitarian system started coming in, and I think it was France who sent 1,000 volunteers to help. But then what they didn't realize is, like, I mean, out of 20 million people, like only million people got affected. We still had 19 million people who could take care of each other. You don't need that, right? So I think, like, I mean especially in 2007, then when the Tsunami Evaluation Coalition did the tsunami evaluation, they found, like, I mean, that was the key finding. The first one is that affected populations are the first responders to any disaster or a crisis. Second, that international agencies, including the United Nations, should follow the affected populations rather than try to control them. But again, that was it, and we see it again and again in other disasters and conflicts even today, that we never listen to affected populations.
I mean, this is quite interesting because, I mean, we saw the way, especially the Western country, the powerful countries, rich countries, OECD countries respond to this kind of disaster thing. Their first response is send some military, send some, why? I mean, why that kind of mindset's there? I mean, but what you are saying, that's the wrong approach. I mean, because military, it looks like the military, why need military people? What they will do? I mean, will they like control or like do something else?
So there are two elements to this. So in a natural hazard, like, or a disaster situation, there is a usefulness of the military because they have the equipment, they have the training, they have the human resource to go and do the rescue, the cleaning of rubbles and things like that. However, it has to be done under the leadership of the civilian processes, not the other way around. However, like in the United States, led by United States, but more and more in the European context, what we see is that we have securitized the pandemics or the disasters. So what we know, so 2000 tsunami happened, then after about 6 months, I think Hurricane Katrina happened in the United States. So the first reaction of the US government was to send the military, and because they saw it as a security problem, because it's easy, because the whole idea is to control, because any civilian or any disaster where civilians are responding, it is very chaotic. It's not going to be orderly fashion. Of course, like, I mean, in any community, regardless whether there's a disaster or not, or a conflict or not, there are people who are kind, genuinely trying to help each other, but there are also people who are cunning and trying to con people, like any other community. So that doesn't mean that they need to be controlled. But then I think, especially after the thing, from a humanitarian emergency response point of view, after the September 11th 2001 attacks in New York, the whole attitude and the practice of humanitarian responses changed. That's when we started sending more and more military for interventions, and the whole securitization of disasters began to happen, because before that we didn't do that. I mean, I would go back to 1979 when the hurricane or the storms happened in Sri Lanka. Yeah, military was there, like, to clear the roads and all of that, but it was people who were trying to help each other. So this securitization agenda comes in two ways, because one, it's more profitable. It's the business, because more and more countries try to have bigger militaries. So you have these men and women who are sitting in barracks, so let's get them to do things. And then also, I think it is easy to command and control when the military is there. So I think, even in the pandemic, that's what we saw in certain countries. Like, I mean, okay, deploy the military. It's a public health emergency. It's not a military or security emergency. But we still kept sending the military to take care of a public health problem.
Yeah. because like one of the things, like when I was doing peacekeeping thing, I mean, one big criticism is like, the peacekeepers sent without any understanding about the local culture, local language, local, any kind of understanding. You just go there and they fix it, with a gun. Or like, perhaps there were some goodwill that, we need to protect people. But at the same time, these things are kind of, you need those things if you really want to help. Because if you cannot communicate, I mean, how can you help? But I think in like disaster situation like tsunami, it's like sudden. It comes from nowhere, so you don't have much time to prepare yourself to learn someone's language. And like UN was, I mean, been criticized for, because there's no standing army for UN peacekeepers. No, so you just like hire people, ask people, contribute, and then you send them. And it takes time. It depends on like which country you are going. So if you need peacekeepers for Somalia, it will take months. If you need peacekeepers in like Cyprus, it can be very easy, very quickly. So do you think, I mean, those kind of things need to talk about, some kind of, some of the troops might be just prepared for that kind of area, disaster management, or like, but it has to be some kind of global coordination as well. It's not like one particular country will say that, yeah, I can help. Like, and like France, or especially Western countries, has got this tendency. It's like kind of auto reflex by the, the colonial rulers, that they know Africa, so they have to go there fast, and most of the time it created more problem than actually solving the problem. What's your take on this kind of area?
I think the problem with the United Nations is it is an intergovernmental organization. So it doesn't have the authority to coordinate. The problem, like say again, when you talk about the humanitarian coordination, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UNOCHA, they are supposed to be coordinating humanitarian responses, but they don't control funding. The moment you are not controlling the funding, you don't have any authority. So then the US government give funding to the NGOs, and the British government give funding to the NGOs. They go and do whatever they want to do. The only time I've seen that they coordinate with each other when there are no funding. 2005 in Western Darfur, Sudan, there was less funding. Everybody was coordinating with each other because they had to. And then you come to Sri Lanka, like 2005, after the tsunami, nobody wanted to coordinate because everybody was happily raising their own funding. And tsunami is the only time that the humanitarian system had more than they asked for, because it was after the Christmas. Everybody was generous to donate. And in that process, this whole global coordination is problematic, because we don't have a global police. We don't have a global policing mechanism in that way. So nobody can step in and control and coordinate. And then I think the peacekeeping, or the especially from a peacekeeping point of view, again, this was 2005. The African Union and the Egyptian military as peacekeepers to Western Darfur, which was a disaster itself, because Egyptians were treated as Arabs, and the whole war is between the Africans and Arabs. And so there was no understanding even at the top policy level that there is like this is how it's going to work out. I think so that's the policy element of understanding the context and how you actually engage with people and all of that. And then the second level is the training of the military personnel or the soldiers who go to the field. How do we train them about, like, I mean, again, from a Sri Lankan point of view, there were cases of sexual misconduct in Haiti by the Sri Lankan peacekeepers. And again, what do you expect? Like, I mean, you don't train them about not just I'm not talking about the human rights or anything, but you don't train these soldiers about engaging with people who are in vulnerable situations, and what is your own conduct. And also what we forget is, especially in the Sri Lankan case, these were the same soldiers who were coming from a war, right? So they obviously had their own problems as well. So, and then apart from the training, then comes the element of what are you doing on the ground, because most of the time you are given a specific mandate, and some cases you can't even use your weapons. So then the warring parties knows that these people are useless anyway. So there are many layers of issues about peacekeeping, and I think the only time I've seen an effective group of peacekeepers were this was in Liberia, and it was a female troops from India. They were much more engaging with the community, because being female, you could easily engage and collaborate with the community. So they were conducting health camps, and they were doing so many other activities with women folks in the community, which the male soldiers don't necessarily have. So there, like, I think there are pockets of good examples, but I think, like anything else, we never learn from our mistakes. We continue to do the same mistakes, but there are opportunities to do good by changing the structures of peacekeeping or the patterns of peacekeeping, but we never follow it up, no. So I think, yeah, but then I think the most other important element is, how are you going to engage with the military in that country as well. Who are, like, what are our negotiations, what are our engagement with them is also important. So I think in any solution to a peace building process has to be the political policy level, but also engagement at the local level. But then what we are not necessarily doing very well is coordinate between those levels. So they are like all ad hoc interventions. Like, I mean, again, coming from Sri Lanka, I have seen many peace building programs in Sri Lanka, just waste of money and resources. I know, like, I mean, few people got good PhDs out of it, coming from the UK or USA. Other than that, like, we haven't seen a solution there.
That's the story of our peace building in Afghanistan. For 20 years, peace building, it's not only achieved anything, but also, the colossal loss of, everything. So the things we started to prevent, at the end, it came back. So I mean, and in between, we spent $1 trillion taxpayers' money.
It is like, see, to me, the whole thing is that, like war, peace is also business. Peace building is also business. I mean, like, I mean, you go to any seminar meeting, you see the same business people who are doing peace building. I mean, I don't want to name the names, but they are, like, I mean, you see them everywhere. Worked in Sri Lanka, worked in Afghanistan, did this and that. Like, but then my big question is, so where have you built peace then? Give me one example. Or we don't have anything. Then what are you doing? You must be a failure then, no? Because you couldn't bring peace to anywhere, and you're still trying to claim, or you're still claiming that you're in peace building. That's one. And second, personal level, I've seen a lot of peace building experts can't get together with each other. They hate each other sometimes. So if you're coming from a particular university, I'm talking from the UK experience, particular university in the north, and then you go to southern university, they don't talk to each other. And then again, as a Sri Lankan, I think, so you guys can't get together, and how are you going to build peace then? So that's I, again, coming from the personal experience of Sri Lanka, is it is a big business, and people knowingly or unknowingly, this whole war and peace goes together in that sense. Because I personally think, like I was talking about the Sri Lankan experience, like is that any level of reconciliation has to be within the people in that country. It has to be an organic process. I mean, it's bit like that you're gardening. You could make the soil. You could make sure there is enough fertilizer. You could make sure enough water and sunlight. But you can't push the seed to bring the plant out. It happens its own way. So to me, I think any peaceful process has to be owned by the people, and it has to come through the people of that particular country. And that is again through their own evolution in terms of social, political, cultural processes and institutions. So I think in Afghanistan, the biggest problem was that we were trying to introduce a Western style governance structure there, and it doesn't work like that. And who said that the European or North American democracy is the best democracy? There are different types of democracies we see, and if it works for the people in that particular country, then yeah, why not? And again, I'm talking from very like, again, it's not about like saying like, oh, this is right or wrong, but to understand what works for that group of people. Because again, like, I mean, going back to somewhere like Bangladesh in 90s, the level of poverty, level of issues and all of that, and generally Bangladesh was regarded as the poorest country in the region. But now look at Bangladesh, who are giving loans to Sri Lanka, right? So that's the natural evolution that should come from a society or a country, rather than trying to impose something external that's not owned by people. I think even with countries like Afghanistan, we may not necessarily agree with what is happening right now, but they have to go through their own experience and processes. Like, I mean, again, going back like 200-300 years ago in the UK, like from there to now, like how the democracy evolved in the UK. So if that's the case, we can't like, yeah, like we can fast forward the evolution of governance or democracy in another country. I think we don't necessarily understand that, but then it is connected with the capital marketplace. So because the whole NGO industry about peace building and all of that is a business.
I mean, one funny story is like in like Afghanistan during the colonial period, there's actually a movement about women's rights, women's suffragettes and all those things. So they're looking for women's right to vote. And the people who actually stopped that actually British rulers. And the same people went there in like 2000 to actually
Yeah. It's the same in Egypt, same
we could
in
have done it in 100 years ago.
yeah. No, I mean, like some of the photographs we see in Palestine or Egypt, like it could be anywhere in the world. And then you look at the country today to realize, like, yeah. So this whole external intervention idea is not very helpful. And I think, like, even when you again bringing it to the humanitarian experience, is the humanitarian responses, the largest donors in the humanitarian sectors are the United States, the Germany, EU institutions, and the UK. And the largest recipients are the Syrians, Yemen, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, and South Sudan. So suddenly we are not just giving food and shelter, we are also giving them, exporting our ideologies to those countries as well. So that's why we keep failing in these responses. That's why we keep failing to create a lasting solution to those problems, because we don't, I mean, again, the South Sudan peace process, at one point I saw a lot of South Sudan politicians were hanging around in 5-star hotels in Addis Ababa, and getting paid about like $500 a day per diems. So if you're getting paid that much of money, who wants to make peace then? Right? Because then suddenly, yeah, like you're living in a good place, right?
Because I mean, all those big guys who go there, because making peace with those another big guys is easy,
Mm, mm,
not to the actual mass on the ground.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
difficult task, isn't it?
it is. And it needs patience, it needs engagement, it needs that that realization that should come within the people. And again, that comes through education, that comes through long-term engagement. But then most projects, most funded projects we have are only 2 years maximum. So sadly, a 30-year-old problem cannot be solved within your 2-year project. So that's the whole thing. And it needs a lot of patience, it needs a lot of hard work, commitment. And we don't think like that anymore, because we always think from a short-term perspective. Like, I mean, even when you think about the whole, because the research excellence framework came out like yesterday, and most of our research based on like 2-year, 3-year projects, maximum 5 years. But then if you look at someone like Charles Darwin, he wouldn't be able to participate in ref exercise because he was supposed to do his research within 5 years, but then he went and do his field work for 8 years, right? So there is no, we don't have enough patience or enough enough capacity to have a long-term commitment to anything. I mean, yeah, like, so that's why to me, like, I mean, if I'm going to do, like, so many of my collaborations are long-term. Some of the research work I do are like with friends whom I know for last 10, 15, 20 years, because they are relationships. They are not based on funding, they are not based on some external grant, because these are, yeah. And so that way you don't have to sit and have like meetings and negotiations if you're doing something. And this is what we keep missing with this intervention type research or intervention type humanitarian assistance.
I mean, like what you are saying, it sounds like, this like human capital, social capital, those things should be the priority when you talk about any kind of intervention to save people's lives or do something good there. And what I'm seeing here, the picture is all about, it's very bureaucratic, and then, put some people there and then sending them to a 5-star hotel, to talk to them. And then, so like, that's nothing to do with like anything.
No. Yeah, like, I mean, because, like, I mean, because it's my idea of peace that I'm imposing on you. So in my country, this is how we do peace. We meet in a posh hotel and talk to each other. But then in a different country, they may not do that. They might sit under a tree and drink tea. That's how they would do negotiations. So what's our ability to get to that context, understand that context, and then engage with people at their level? And again, I'm not necessarily saying it from that, oh, my level is better than your level, but the level you are engaging is relevant to your context. And we don't necessarily understand that. And again, like, say, go somewhere like Afghanistan, like, of course, like from the surface, it looks like men make all these decisions and all of that. But then when you actually get inside to the community, you know that a lot of older elderly women holds power and authority. So if you are really going to convince the community, you have to engage at all those different levels of that community. To do that, you need to take time to get to know them, build friendships, build relationships, and then only you would get to have some level of trust. So then you could actually work with them. So in much of my work, that's what we do. We don't, I mean, I don't necessarily go to a place short term. It's always a long-term commitment, and that's the collaboration. That way, yeah. So you don't just disappear like, okay, my project is finished, I'll go away. You don't do that, because these are human beings like me, like you and I. So we need to treat them with respect and honor. And again, in different parts of the world, different cultures, different societies, they have different practices. So you need to learn from that. Again, I'm not necessarily saying you have to agree with them, but then you need to know why they are doing what they are doing, and how you are going to engage with that. Again, like say, and that's the problem, no? Like, so when you go to a place and from the surface or from outside you see something wrong happening, but when you are inside you realize, no, actually that's not that wrong. And how are you going to engage with that? And again, the other aspect is most of these practices are happening for thousands of years. Again, your 2-year, 3-year project is not going to solve any of that. So you need and to me, that's why I think over the past 5 years, we try to engage with universities and institutions in countries. How do we make sure like we help them to figure out like whatever the curriculums they want to develop, what they want to work on, and then we assist them rather than saying, okay, this is what you need to do. They are like much more collaborations rather than driven by funding. Because again, like, I mean, before the pandemic, even like much of the work we do is now through internet, like through Zoom meetings and all of that, because I don't have to like go like somewhere in Africa to for a 3-hour meeting. Right. And it's a waste of resources, but also again from the bigger picture of climate change and all of that, you don't need that. So we can still engage with each other, and I'm useful from this end to review something or assist something, or get, like provide some more information and things like that. But you in that particular country knows better than me about your context. So yeah. So that way there is no expert, or there is no leader or follower. It's that we are all in an equal level learning from each other. And I think that's something I find much more satisfying and much more exciting, because at the end of the day, again, from a humanitarian perspective, the success of your humanitarian intervention or response is that one day you're not going to have a job because you are good, that people have learned all your skills and they don't need you anymore. They can take care of them. But we don't do that, right? So to me, like, I mean, when people don't need me, that's the success indicator of my work. So some of the colleagues and friends I work with, they don't even talk to me. I mean, talk to me in the sense they don't come to me for advice anymore. We have become good friends and the friendship is there, but they don't need me. They don't need me to help them to write a proposal or write a curriculum or write their training manual or anything like that, because they're capable. And that's something is not very good in the marketplace, because I'm working out of a job, right? So, but then in the project-based, donor-driven projects, you need to keep saying, oh, my work is so important that I need to do this or that. But then that is the antithesis to what we are trying to do. So yeah. So to me, that's where I think, like, I mean, if we could engage with universities, if we could engage with whatever the structures they have in a country, and support them, because they are going to be there, no? Like, I mean, there was a student from University of Mosul in the height of the war, and who actually went back to work there, right? And that's the commitment, and that's the long-term commitment, where you actually change a society. It's not by telling them this is how you do it within 2 years period. No, because some of these places are being destroyed beyond recognition, and it will take another 2-3 generations before we see some progress. And yeah, so to me, that's why, like, I mean, collaborating with communities, affected populations, and people who are within the country is much more important, and also people who are beyond capital cities as well. Yeah.
Like one thing I really want to bring is, it's a kind of, the whole thing is very collective, and it looks like, when you do all those things, part of that collective approach is, I think the one thing missing is the Western mass, the Western people, the citizenry. They are not involved, that way, politically or emotionally or any way. But one thing they do, they fund, they're the taxpayers. So like when you spend like $1.3 trillion somewhere, like, I mean, if you just spend $1.3 trillion in any country, I think you can make the whole country super rich.
Yeah.
So that this taxpayer never asks question that, I mean, what really happened to our money? Why did we spend that money? What's your balance sheet? Why there is no that kind of urge there from the mass? Why the mass is accepting that position that, oh, do you know what? Yeah, that's fine. No, forget about that.
It's the good training. Through schools, we teach people not to ask questions. Through the universities, we tell them, look, okay, you take this knowledge and go and do what you have to do. We train the citizens not to ask questions. That's one. I think, I mean, if you look at somewhere like the United Kingdom, I think Margaret Thatcher in 80s destroyed all sorts of social movements. I mean, again, like, I mean, living in northeast of England, I've seen in Newcastle, like, I mean, where the trade unions were very, very powerful, and suddenly they were all gone. Right? So there are no social movements. That's one. And second, I think it's a much more complex situation, because people are being distracted by the media. They are distracted by the celebrities or even the royal family, and all of that. So they don't ask the real questions. I mean, why do we, like, I mean, every week you go to the supermarket to see that the cost of living is rising, and nobody's asking that question, yet alone, like, where is my taxpayers' money going? So I think it's again, I'm not necessarily talking about a particular society or culture, but then I think through education we train people not to ask questions. I mean, again, go back to a 6-year-old child. The biggest question they keep asking is why. And as adults, what we do is, oh, don't ask questions, keep quiet. So for next 12 years, you've been told don't ask questions. Of course, then as an adult, you're not going to ask any question. So it's proper training, because when you look at our institutional education system, it is inherently connected to the marketplace. No? So we need good employees who follow the orders, doesn't now ask questions, right? So that's what it is. So at the end of the day, people are being told, like, okay, like, I mean again, that's the part of the process, is we don't like yeah, like, so we have been told again and again, oh, the UK government is providing aid to save millions of people in this place and that place, but nobody is giving the check and balances of that, right? And it's the same in the United States. It's the same process, because what is again interesting from a humanitarian perspective is that the United Kingdom and United States, they use humanitarian interventions or humanitarian assistance as an extension of their foreign policy. And then you have the European Union, which doesn't have foreign policy. They use humanitarian assistance as a substitute to foreign policy. So suddenly the humanitarian support is coming with conditions.
Mm.
They are not charities. They are to create more market for to promote the interest of the donor, right? So in that, like, I mean, they're all interconnected in that sense. Like, so you go to Dundee, that old lady who give £10 to the charity every month, she never get a report about an annual report how that's been spent, right? But that's been taught very well, like, okay, it's your duty to give charity, and that's it, right? And there is no explanation that most of these disasters and conflicts are created by the same system that you are giving charity to, right? So it's the same part of the process. Mhm.
Mm. Mm. No, it's like, I mean, like one of the keyword you use, like the way the part of the Western mechanism is try to securitize the humanity.
Mm.
So like even like what's happening in terms of UK's domestic politics,
Mm.
the Priti Patel's idea about securitize the whole English Channel is a
Mm.
brilliant idea,
Mm.
like Navy and everything.
Mm. Mm.
Sometimes I just try to see, like, I mean, how big is English Channel? It's not like
Mm.
Tay River. It's English
Mm.
Channel. It's a long haul.
Yeah. Mm.
So how many military you need? People don't ask those questions. Like, I mean,
No.
can you actually militarize the whole thing?
Mm.
And what does it mean? I mean, how much that will cost
Mm. Mm.
in terms of how much cost effective this can be actually?
Mm. Mm.
Or there are like the elements about the humanity, you know when people are crossing boat with a very small boat with their family members. I mean, what's happening in their minds? So my child, I mean, I tell my students this story. A couple of years ago, Dundee is quite welcoming
Mm.
for the like
Yeah.
refugees, and we do lots of things around that. And in one event, we did this like candlelight
Mm.
thing, poetry, song, and everything on the top of a hill
Mm.
at night. And I took my two daughters, they're very young.
Mm.
And normally you can take your car up to the hill. But for some reasons on that day, the roads are closed. So you
Yeah.
have to walk up.
Yeah.
And it was drizzling, it's a bit rain, and it's windy and it's cold. And my youngest daughter decided not to go there at all because this is
Mm.
dangerous. Because Scotland is quite,
Mm.
notorious for slugs. Lots of
Mm.
slugs come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can see, like, my daughter is reluctant to go
Mm.
just this small walk.
Mm.
And when your parents ask you
Mm.
to get on this mini boat
Mm.
and we'll cross English Channel,
Mm.
I mean, you just cannot fathom it. Like, what kind of things going on there?
But then again, like, I think, to me, the problem is, like, so refugees are an indicator of a bigger problem, right? So what are we really doing to facilitate lasting solutions in these countries they are coming from? And again, that's the global responsibility we keep forgetting about, right? Because nobody wants to leave their country involuntarily, right? Like, people like you and I, for various reasons, end up in different parts of the world, beyond our home countries, but that's our choice. But then nobody wants to become a refugee, and that needs a solution. So it's not about that. I mean, when people says, okay, we need to accept this many refugees into our country, but why can't our country do something to stop the war in that country, right? So to me, it's all interconnected in that sense. So then there is another layer to it. Like, I mean, you are very right, because people do take risks on behalf of children. I mean, I have a 11-year-old boy at home, and yeah, like, I mean, you do anything for them, right? So that's where people are doing like risky things. to move away, like go into other places and all of that. So becoming a refugee is not a light decision. That okay, let's move to England now from northern Iraq. It's not that light decision. They are like very serious decisions. But why do you have to do that? I mean, a lot of my friends who came from Syria, who came from Iraq to the UK, now, like what is really interesting is what they are looking at is, my gosh, like back home we had more space, we had more bigger houses. Like what are we doing here now? Right? So obviously if they had security, if they had a better country with better opportunities, they wouldn't be thinking about becoming refugees in a country like they saw in the US or anywhere. Right? So again, to me, the responsibility we have is to think about lasting solutions to problems or the conflicts and disasters that are happening across the globe. So we don't have to worry about refugees coming in, right? What we are doing is we are not providing solutions to the problems, but also we are trying to use refugees as an opportunity to gain political power within these countries. So much of what is happening in here or in the United States or Canada is connected to your election cycles. It's nothing that anybody care about the refugees. It's I mean, like so to me, that's how I look at the problem. So to me, the global responsibility we should have is to make sure that that we, if we could facilitate solutions, like I mean, again, like I mean, look at somewhere like Afghanistan, like with the recent events, like I mean, people are going through famines and all of that, and nobody's even talking about that.
Because everyone is worried.
So
Everyone is worried about just a couple of refugees are crossing English Channel. They're worried about them. This is the like lowest common denominator, isn't it?
yeah, in return, in an ironical way, like I mean, maybe our people should have been cautious when those Europeans were coming to our countries. No, that was our mistake. We welcomed them and said, "Oh, come in," like, and started treating them better, and then they took over over our countries. No, so that's the whole thing.
But they did not take permission when they went to our place, and they stayed
Yeah,
there for
yeah,
300 years, and then took away everything as well.
yeah.
But no one was, taught about those things, what really happened, just a couple of years
Oh
ago.
no, that's like, I mean, to me, that's why I said, like, in education we only talk about like things that is useful in the marketplace. We never facilitate creativity, imagination among children or students, no. And it's very difficult more and more to be creative in learning. And yeah, so in the same way, we don't teach history. We don't, I mean, even in our part of the world, we don't necessarily teach proper history either.
And then you'll never learn those things like, I mean, humility, the kindness and compassion, because we never did any bad thing, we're always good.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
understanding is never there, never ever there. I actually stopped watching. Sometimes they do this talk show on the here. This is so toxic, so toxic. So a bunch of
Oh no.
people, like who has got nothing to do with Afghanistan. They are in the panel and then talking about Afghanistan. I mean, this is just like, I mean, what's the right word? This is just like this is just crime. These are the people, criminals, who are making policies and also coming to the big panels in the national TV and saying that we are the good guy, so we have to have the full support from you guys.
I mean, yeah, like I mean, there is that hypocrisy continue, and I mean, like, say recent, like I mean, in the Caribbean, in Jamaica and other places, when people are protesting, people are shocked here. Oh, why they are protesting? Because they've been they've been they have been experiencing theft and looting and slavery and everything. But yeah, we don't talk about that. And it's the same thing. Like, I mean, there are less of my students who knows about the Bengal famine in 1945, right? And then, like, say, so that's the only thing we know properly. Even there are so many British administrated famines across the colonies, because, like, I mean, they've decided, okay, there are too many people here, like, we need to make sure the population is manageable, right? So then you think, like, that cruelty never get discussed from a
No. No.
practical, or even, like, most of the disasters and conflicts we see today are like because of the colonial roots or
Mm,
colonial project.
mm,
And again, we don't take responsibility, we don't take action.
mm,
Mm.
mm,
I think what is really interesting is, at least from a South Asian perspective, we see a change over the past, like, 10-15 years now. Like, I think, not it's not just it just it's not something just happened within last 10-15 years, but then you see people like Vijay Prashad, like Shashi Tharoor. People are emerging and openly talking about
mm,
these things, because again, I think it took so long, like, say, someone like my father's generation, who were told, like, not to question the Europeans, or Europeans especially, to get to that generation that they are happy to openly criticize and 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 engage with that debate. So I
mm,
think it will happen, it will change, but it
mm,
takes time, because still we have people in our part of the world who still admire the colonial masters, who would say, okay, they gave us the train tracks, they did this and that, right? And yeah, like, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I mean, you go to Southern Africa, you go to South Asia, there are, like, older people who would say, no, 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 without the British we wouldn't have trains. So what? But we don't we don't yeah, but so I think there is the change of that consciousness, or thinking, especially the generation before us and after us, are much more moving, but yeah, it'll take some time.
mm, mm.
Mm,
I'm like, I mean, I teach Middle East politics as well. This is like last 15 years.
mm,
And Edward's side played a big role in my
mm,
own personal life as well.
mm,
Um, um, I mean, I think the power of knowledge and how the
mm,
knowledge is manufactured,
mm,
it's so dangerous. I mean, and it just happens, and it stays hundreds of years. And the problem is it created such a powerful knowledge in the society, and it just continues. So, like,
mm,
for example, we teach in the university, in the education
mm,
sectors, like people like, John Stuart Mill, very famous philosopher. But
mm,
also he's got another kind of link. His father is also a philosopher, James Mill.
mm, mm,
So James Mill actually wrote books on India.
mm,
So we are talking about the time when, the British rulers were there, the
yeah,
East India Company was
mm,
there, and we are talking, these are the elites in the
mm,
society.
mm,
So they will write books, and the books will be read in Cambridge,
mm,
Oxford, and all those
yeah,
institutes, and people will learn about those things,
mm,
and these people will be posted in India as a civil servant,
yeah,
okay, with this kind of knowledge. I mean, James Mill was so excited. He thought that he really knows about India. He's never been to India. He never
yeah,
saw anyone
mm,
from India. He wrote 6 volumes, six
mm,
volumes.
mm, mm,
And the people, like, around him, his friend circle asked, like, what's his name? This economist, famous economist, David Ricardo, and all those people.
mm, yeah,
No one asked him that. I mean, why you were writing this book, mate?
mm,
You know nothing about India. Why you
mm,
were writing it? And it
mm,
was so bad. At the end, he thought that since he knows about India, he should write a book on China as well.
yep, yeah,
It's just volumes after volumes.
mm,
But if you read the book,
mm,
it's nothing to do with India or China.
no, no,
It's against India and China. It's
mm,
against about
mm,
their religion,
yeah,
about their people, about
mm,
the weather, about
mm,
how backdated they are, how
mm,
dirty they are.
mm,
I mean, that's the thesis. It's like, PhD thesis on India
mm,
without
mm,
doing any kind of research.
mm, mm,
So that's the knowledge being created, and as there, if you look at any Western institutes,
mm.
these people are still well revered. No one
Yeah,
hardly knows. So when I tell this story to my students, they're like, "Are you sure he wrote?"
yeah. Mm. I think there are two levels to that. Like, so one aspect is that's the same arrogance I was referring earlier. Like, I mean, I have colleagues now even who done their PhDs on Israel-Palestine conflict by doing 2 weeks fieldwork, right? I'm sure you met enough of them as well. So that's the level of arrogance you think like, oh, okay, like, so, I mean, I'm from Sri Lanka, you're from Bangladesh, but we still don't know many things about our own countries. You can't claim to be an expert. So that's one aspect. But also the second aspect is that in the colonial project, we were being told again and again that our own philosophies are not good enough. Right. So again, that's why when you talk about, like, say, someone like Franz Fanon to Walter Rodney to Amilcar Cabral, Kwame Nkrumah, and then in the I mean, I'm not going to list the Asian ones, but we were like, I mean, most people don't even know about these people, right? And they are in the same caliber or even sometimes better than the European philosophers. I mean, you go back to something like Ayurveda, Ayurvedic philosophy of health and all of that, and even the WHO still can't get it figured out, like, okay, how they integrated the concept of health and ownership of health among people, right? So only now we are going back to figure that out, because for 500 years we've been told, no, whatever you were doing is not good enough. But then to sum things up, I think, like, I mean, when you think about ICRC as the beginning of the humanitarian system, it was only in 1863, and it's 159 years ago. And the big question then is, how did we survive for thousands and thousands of years without the humanitarian system, right? Without these interventions. So to me, that's the key aspect. Like, I mean, every culture, every society had their own ways of dealing with life, and again, some worked, some didn't work, that as anything else. So until we decided, okay, no, we have to go and teach people how to live their lives, or be civilized. And to me, I think that's the continuation of the colonial project in that sense, because we are still colonizing people's minds. And one of the South Asian scholars called Ponna Vignaraja, like, who wrote a lot about poverty and participatory development elements, I mean, again, I go back to like 1980s. He was talking about decolonizing the minds of people before decolonizing research or decolonizing education. So that's the whole thing. Or someone like Walter Mignolao from Argentina was talking about decolonization from a very intellectual, very creative perspective. I think that's what we need to think about. And when we talk about the colonial project, it's not just the global South got colonized, but also the people in Europe as well. Because, I mean, again, I connect that to people who don't ask questions about the taxpayers' money. I mean, the whole colonial project, in that, only about 200 families benefit from that. Rest of the British people were suffering. I mean, again, I'm talking from the northeast of England experience. Yeah, like, I mean, they were like, I mean, you go back to those museums of coal mines and all of that. About 100 years ago, at the age of 7, you have been sent to the pit to work. So again, it was about very few minority of wealthy elites who got benefited from the colonialism. And I think in the same way, the people were kept in the dark in the colonies. People here also kept in the dark, and again from the modern um, capitalist market system, that's the same thing we do. People are very busy and distracted thinking about the celebrities to other things, but real issues never get discussed.
I'm kind of aware of time. I think because I always try to finish that James Mill's story because he wrote 6 volumes and then he wrote on China.
Of course.
And then you know what he got? His reward was he got a job with East India Company in London.
Of course.
And during that time he was earning £2 million a year.
Yeah.
And John Stuart Mill is his son. He's the direct beneficiary of his father's knowledge. It's got nothing to do with like anything, isn't it? It's all about him, his success, his job in the East India Company.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I sometimes jokingly say in meetings when people introduce themselves in the meetings, they would say, "Oh, I'm a Southern African expert. I'm a South Asian expert," and I would always say, I'm an English expert because I live in the UK for 18 years. I speak the language, I eat the local food, and I even have local friends. So then people get very upset about it because no, you can't say that. Why not? I mean, as much as you are a South Asian expert, then I should be a British expert, no? So that's the whole thing. Like, so suddenly, if somebody could write books about India or China without even going there, like, then why not? Like, we should be able to claim the same thing. It is the irony of it, and I think that's what try to be in control. No, I mean, CLM James wrote his PhD in 1940s, and the British government actively prevented his thesis getting published because it was about how slavery contributed to capitalism. So yeah, so it's as long as you write something that is not going to hurt the system, then that's fine.
But also the problem is it's not only that, but it also sustained that system as well to continue.
Yeah. And that's why I think, like, when I keep saying, like, okay, if you are in the humanitarian system, your job, like, your aim should be to come out from a job. But we can't do that because we need to maintain this system because it keeps feeding. Like, I mean, all these wars are being fed by the humanitarian system as well, because the same donors who are providing weapons to the warring parties are providing funds to the humanitarian system. So actually, if we stop the weapons manufacturing, then we don't need the humanitarian industry. I don't know. I mean, yeah. So you think, like, yeah, it's all interconnected in that sense. And again, in the Western knowledge system, what we do is we dissect the little things, no? So we only look at this part, because, like, even when you study politics, we don't necessarily talk about the social cultural elements of politics. We don't talk about the environmental elements of politics, because environment is something different from politics then. But we can't do that. It's all interconnected. And again, that's my learning from collaborating with people on the ground, because yeah, if you're a farmer, you don't get up in the morning and think like, okay, from 6 to 7 I think about my economic problems, and 7 to 8 I think about my environmental problem. It's all together, you know? So
I think we'll stop here today because we can talk whole day, whole night.
Exactly.
And I think, you know, even this talk is good for you, good for me. It's our therapy, isn't it? Kind of therapy.
It is. Yeah.
And, you know, and if people listen to us and if they get some kind of therapy, good for them. You know, because the whole system, the structure, even the education system, the university structure, everything is just too bureaucratic, too many managers there. No, the things we are doing is not education. No, the critical thinking is not there. We don't have time to teach students. No, just come in a lot and then just like go. Okay, here's the degree, and then now go for a job, 9 to 5 job. Okay, and then and also there's a serious, you know, kind of defunding education, the good educations,
Yeah.
oh, you don't need to know about,
Mm.
human complexity or,
Yeah. Mm.
because those are the things, you just need to
Yeah.
have some vocational training so that you can be a good plumber or like, some roads or buildings. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it doesn't work. It will not work for you, but it will work for you, David Cameron or Boris Johnson, because they studied these things and then they became actually prime ministers. For them,
But
it
then
worked.
that's also the connection. That's also the, like, say, I always tell my students, like, so in our part of the world, we have nepotism, no? And in this part of the world, we have networking, which is the same thing. So there is not much of a difference. Um, so I think, like, that's what I try to do at a personal level. I mean, to me, the friendships, like, I mean, like, talking to you is like making a new friend. And that's why, I mean, and in one sense I was surprised, like, when you email me back, because I normally, like, if I see something good, I email them and say, oh, well done, like, this is
Yeah,
great,
yeah.
like,
I mean,
but most people don't even.
so that's
Yeah.
human response, isn't it? So like,
But
when like,
that's the human connection you try to make, but we don't do it anymore, because I wouldn't talk to you unless we could, like, oh, shall we write a proposal and bring some funding
yeah,
together.
yeah.
If there is no such thing, then I don't have to talk to you. Right. So I think we keep away from that genuine human relationships anymore.
Yeah.
Mm,
No, I
mm,
mean, what I do, like, I kind of introduce myself to my new students. I'm actually, like
mm.
50% lecturer and 50% just homeless.
Yeah.
So I just live in a
Mm,
street. I talk to people, random people,
mm,
and then
yeah.
have a
Mm,
like discussion, and then, try
mm,
to learn things from other
mm,
people, other
yeah.
people's experiences. And I've got so much
Mm.
respect for other people's views, you know.
Yeah, but that's the humility you bring in,
Mm,
no? And that humility allows you to be compassionate and collaborate with others.
mm,
But that comes from your cultural training, your background, and all of that. But then, and that's what we try to harness in our son, who is born and bred in the UK. How can you be compassionate? How can you be humble? That you don't know everything, right? You are not better than your cousin in rural Sri Lanka who doesn't even speak English, right? You are also the same child as him, right? How do you make sure that you bring that about? And that's the true education, if you like. That's the true learning. Because at the end of the day, like, I mean, whatever he does, if he can be happy and joyful and be kind to others, that's all we
yeah.
want as a, I mean, that's what we want as a parent.
Mm.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, like, I mean, you don't have to be a doctor or an
No,
engineer.
no.
I mean, that's what we were told when we were going to school, but I think again that is changing quite a lot as a perception. So yeah. Mm,
Mm, mm.
mm. No, I think that's great, because very much, like, I mean, let's meet up again at some point
Yeah, so
and
I'm also thinking of, bringing you to my class as well to talk to my,
Mhm.
because so many
Definitely.
things I teach, are
Mm,
related to your work.
mm,
So you are also a practitioner as well. You can bring your
mm,
own personal
mm.
experience, those
Yeah.
things.
Mm.
So, but also it's part of our that decolonizing process as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm,
Lots of things we covered today is kind of
mm,
background stuff. I'm
mm.
I'm like more interested, like in future talk will be more specific, very specific
Sure.
particular case
Yep.
study to go through and then try
Mhm.
to explore. So that's
Yep.
my plan. And
Okay.
like I think you'll be one of my kind of regular contributor for this day.
Thank you. Mm.
So thank you so much, Janaka. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Okay, thank
Yes,
you
yes.
very much,
Okay.
and give my regards to your family
Thank you.
and
Same to
especially
you. Yeah.
your daughters. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye
you.
then.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.
Votre toast, je peux vous le rendre, Seigneur, Seigneur, car avec les soldats torrente